A large revenue surplus in North Dakota, the low quality of life in California, and a look at the United States military involvement in Yemen. I'm Martin Rather. This is The Underreported. We begin this week with our segment, Something You Might Have Missed. Many Americans are unaware of the United States' role in the conflict in Yemen, but our nation's military leaders may be unaware of how U.S. weapons are being used there in war. Just last week, the head of U.S. Central Command, General Joseph Votel, testified before Congress. He made a startling admission when questioned by Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts about whether or not the United States knows the results of strikes that the U.S. helps to set up, whether via refueling or tactical planning. Take a look.
Does CENTCOM track the purpose of the missions that it is refueling? In other words, where a U.S. refueled aircraft is going, what targets it strikes, and the results of the mission?
Senator, we do not.
Okay.
This matters in part because of an incident in February in Sada, Yemen, where the U.S.-backed Saudi coalition executed a strike which killed 5 civilians and then also killed medical staff who rushed in to help as a second missile was deployed. Did the U.S. have any involvement in that errant strike? We don't know. In this Yemeni conflict, which effectively is a civil war with the rebel Houthis against the authoritarian regime of Abdrabbuh Hadi and his Saudi allies, over 10,000 Yemeni civilians have been killed. 3 million people have been displaced. The World Health Organization called the situation in Yemen the world's largest humanitarian crisis. But the United States and Great Britain continue to support the Saudis' involvement, primarily by selling weapons and offering logistical advice. There's a quiet movement in Congress right now to question the United States' involvement in the region, but nothing major just yet. But if our nation's top leaders are unaware of the results of the help that the U.S. is offering, the United States opens itself up to significant risk and exposure. Once those weapons are out of the United States' hands, they could be used for any number of potential catastrophes, including the deaths of civilians, as we may have already seen. Now, on to our national correspondents. If your state had a $5 billion surplus, what would you want your officials to do with it? Cameron Kaufman from Yale University reports on a heated debate in the North Dakota legislature over oil reserve funds.
North Dakota has amassed a fund of over $5.2 billion in state oil tax revenue. Now, lawmakers are proposing to use some of that money to loan to help fund infrastructure projects. 2 Republicans in the North Dakota Legislative Assembly are sponsoring a bill that would allow up to 15% of the fund's principal to be loaned out to infrastructure projects in the state of North Dakota at a low rate of only 1.5%. Now, North Dakotans voted to establish the fund in 2010, mandating that 30% of the state's oil and natural gas tax revenue be put away each year and not spent until at least 2017. With the spending constraint now lifted, politicians are advocating for the spending in order to catalyze infrastructure projects throughout the state. For example, the town of Minot is seeking hundreds of millions of dollars to help fund a flood protection program, and the city of Fargo is seeking $2 billion to help divert the Red River. Both of those projects have stalled, and lawmakers have said that with the money, the projects will be kick-started once again. Now, one more important thing to note is that this legislation will take a 2/3 majority to pass due to the fund's legal structure. The Republicans have a supermajority in North Dakota, but some Republicans are skeptical of using any of the fund's principal for spending, and the Democrats in North Dakota do not want to use the fund for infrastructure and instead are seeking to spend it on education and welfare program shortfalls. If the program does pass, though, it could serve as an interesting model for states looking to stimulate infrastructure projects without raising taxes. Coming to you here from New Haven, Connecticut, I'm Cameron Kaufman, The Underreported.
California. It's home to Hollywood and Disneyland, but the Golden State is at the bottom when it comes to quality of life. Olivia Leveda from Cal Poly University shares more.
Beaches, amusement parks, mountains, and palm trees. According to the 2017 census, with a growing population of over 39.54 million and counting, it seems as if everyone wants to be in California. But in this year's U.S. News and World Report ranking of the best states of America, California falls dead last in quality of life. The report splits quality of life into two sections, social environment and natural environment, which includes factors like community engagement, social support, voter participation, drinking water quality, low industrial toxins, low pollution health risk, and urban air quality. Chino Hills resident Jennifer Allegam is surprised by the ranking.
I think that's actually quite shocking.
Now, California did not fall last in all categories. Among its best scores, California ranked 4th in economy, 11th in healthcare, and 26th in education. So what is there to complain about California? Jennifer says it's the traffic.
The traffic is the one thing that I actually hate about California.
Although the Golden State ranks last in quality of life, overall, U.S. News and World Report lists California as the 32nd best state. From California, Olivia Leveda, The Underreported.
Thanks, Olivia. We'll end by looking back and then looking forward. This week in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Beer and Wine Revenue Act, which levied a tax on all alcoholic beverages. This came on the tail end of Prohibition, which by 1933 had proved difficult and expensive to enforce, and ultimately led to higher rates of alcohol consumption. The Beer and Wine Revenue Act was the first step towards the 21st Amendment, passed in December 1933, which constitutionally empowered sales of alcohol. Cheers. This upcoming week, the United States House is expected to introduce and pass a bill which would allow patients with terminal illnesses to ask biopharma companies for access to experimental treatments which have passed Phase 1 trials. As part of this bill, new requirements for biopharma companies will guarantee reporting on how many patients are accessing these investigational drugs outside of trials. House passage is expected this week, and the Senate already passed a version of this bill last August. That information comes to us from Regulatory Focus. Thank you for joining us this week for The Underreported. If you have any stories that you believe are underreported, please comment below, and we'll do our best to get back to you. For The Underreported, I'm Martin Rather. Have a great week.